Hello there, and welcome to this video guide on writing to describe. I'm going to give you 4 top tips to really help you to improve your descriptive writing in an exam situation. And here they are. Top tip number 1, I want you to lie. Your mum tells you not to do it. I'm telling you that the best way to get a good mark here absolutely is to lie. Top tip number 2 is you've got to think about the senses. I'm sure your teacher's told you this. Think about smell, sound, taste, touch, feelings, all those kind of things. I'll probably miss one there, but we'll go over them in a second. Top tip number 3 when you're writing to describe is to think about an ambitious language. Think about ambitious words you can use, a good vocabulary, figurative language. We'll look at it in a second. And finally, top tip number 4, this sounds really simple, but you've got to write well. You've got to think about your punctuation, your paragraphing, because that is what you're being marked on. Okay, 4 top tips. Let's go over them one by one. Top tip number 1, lie. What do I mean by this? Well, ultimately, the tasks the exam board set, the writing to describe tasks, are really, really boring. Now, descriptive writing should never be boring. It should be interesting, it should be creative. And I'll tell you what, the people who get the best marks for their descriptive writing in exam situations are the ones who can be a little bit more creative in their approach to the task. They're going to make it more interesting, they're going to make it more exciting than the task suggests it should be. Remember, and here is your top tip, the examiner has no idea who you are or where you are. So when they ask you to describe yourself or something near you, you do not have to be the person who they think you are. Let me show you what I mean, okay? Here is a past describe question. Describe yourself. Now, you're in an exam. You see that question. You've got to answer it. Look, that's you, that one there. You and 350,000 other people are GCSE students sat in exam halls. Examiners do not want to read 350,000 identical answers about what school uniform you're wearing and what you had for lunch. So, I'm going to tell you a little secret. You do not have to be you. You can be anybody as long as you can write convincingly as that person. So look at me. I'm kind of suave, sophisticated, quite civilized, intelligent teacher, but I'm not going to write as that. Instead, I'm going to transform myself into rough, tough, battle-scarred war veteran because I think I can write that convincingly. But I'm going to be a battle-scarred war veteran with a kind of soft inside because actually I don't really like fighting and it's all a bit of a fake. So in my planning, I'm going to think of myself as that person. And here's the kind of thing I might write. I've always liked to imagine that I am a highly trained killing machine. I just wish it was true. My physical build is undoubtedly intimidating. Old ladies cross the street to avoid passing me, and I've seen little girls burst into tears after just one glimpse at my bulging biceps. My face bears testament to the many battles I have fought in my life. The most obvious one is a gaping canyon of gnarled flesh running from below my right eye to my chin. If the guys at work knew that this was where my wife hit me with a frying pan, I'd never live it down. So because I've created a slightly more interesting, complex character than this is me, I'm sat in the exam hall, I'm a bit bored to be honest, I can really liven up my writing. It gives me more to say. Let's have a look at another example. We're going to look at the question now, describe the room you're sitting in now. So this time I haven't just got to decide who I am, I've got to decide where I am. So, first of all, room I'm sitting in now, exam hall, crap, boring. Instead, I'm going to be in a prison cell because I've got lots more I can say about it, and it also being in a prison cell is going to make me feel a certain way. I'm going to feel trapped, I'm going to feel miserable, I might feel alone, and that's going to give my writing a certain extra quality, but I'm not going to stop just with, okay, it's me in a prison cell. No, I am going to be some kind of socialite, rich girl, daddy's girl stuck in a prison cell. Think the Cher character from, I've forgotten the name of the film now, but you know the one I mean. Anyway, think her. So she's in a prison cell, I'm her, what am I going to say? Well, I might say something like this. This place is kind of gross. Even just the bed is about the most nauseating, grotesque thing I've ever seen in my life. It smells like somebody died in it. And to be honest, if I have to spend one more night here, I just might too. There's not even a proper toilet. Just a bucket in the corner where what's a girl like me supposed to do with that? And they expect me to slop it out myself. You I just wish my daddy was here to take me away. Sometimes I sit in the corner on the cold concrete floor and stare out of the tiny little window and dream of home. So I'm describing the room I'm sitting in now. Obviously it's a different room, but the examiner doesn't know where you are, so they can't do anything about that. Describing an interesting room, but I'm doing it in the way that I think this character here would do it. And I'm picking the language, the kind of vocabulary that they would use. I'm phrasing it the way I think they would phrase it, and I'm noticing the things that they would notice. And again, it just livens up your writing. It makes it so much more exciting. And it means you can be anybody and you can be anywhere. You could even decide before the exam who you're going to be. I always think kind of a Hannibal Lecter type character is quite interesting to write out as, but it's up to you. Okay, so that's top tip number one. You're going to lie. You're going to lie about who you are, you're going to lie about where you are, and you're going to do it really convincingly, and that's going to affect the way you write, the language you choose, all the rest of it. It's time for top tip number two, and this is the obvious one. It's appealing to the reader's senses. Okay, for this we need another exam task. Describe your nightmare world. And, well, my nightmare world is kind of big children's party with big fluffy characters and screaming kids everywhere, yeah? That would work. I can describe that really well. I can make it sound terrifying, those ugly smelly kids. But I'm going to do it even better if I'm not myself, nice young enthusiastic teacher, quite like kids, I really should anyway, it's part of the job. Instead, I'm going to be this big grumpy Victor Meldrew type character, grouchy old man, wants nothing to do with any of it, because you can see the conflict between the two. It's a really happy place, but I'm a really miserable old sod. So I'm going to write as him, and here is the kind of thing I might write. This is a nightmare too horrible to imagine. A world which just does not bear thinking about, let alone describing. Your ears are constantly assaulted by the whining, shrieking laughter of happy children. What can they possibly have to be happy about? Stuffing their snotty faces with lurid pink foul-tasting confections of every variety. It makes me shudder. I feel like it's a conspiracy. Even the air smells sweet and the grass beneath my feet feels somehow bouncy. Okay, so I'm describing quite a nice place, but in a really miserable, grouchy kind of way. And I'm appealing to the five senses. Have a look at this. Sense number one, your ears are constantly assaulted by the whining, shrieking laughter of happy children. Well, that's something I can hear. Then I've got something I can see, the lurid pink confections, yeah? And I mentioned how they taste, so I've got the taste in there. Down the bottom, I've got the air smells sweet, so there's a smell and a feeling the grass feels bouncy beneath my feet. Now, you don't want to be too unsubtle with this. If your writing becomes a list of all I could smell was, all I could taste was, all I could feel was, then it gets really dull. So you want to be throwing these in throughout because they can give more detail to your description, but don't go over the top because it gets really dull. So that is top tip number two, senses. And we're nearly there because the last two top tips are really straightforward. Top tip number three is you've got to use ambitious language. What do I mean by ambitious language? Well, first and foremost, you've got to use as wide a vocabulary as possible. I've done another video on vocabulary choices featuring these guys, the Seven Dwarfs, so I suggest you have a look at that. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but you need to use as many ambitious words as possible. Then, think about figurative language, similes, metaphors. You can maybe use some personification, that kind of thing, because it will make your description come alive. And also think about the kind of language or tone your persona would use. So the character you've created to write as, what sort of words would they choose? So be ambitious. You want to be using some sophisticated language, but at the same time think about, well, how would they say it? Because it will give your writing that extra quality that we're looking for. So that's top tip number three, ambitious language. And our final top tip, and this is the really painfully obvious one, is you've got to write well. You're being marked on your writing, so it's so important to get the basics right. Think about your spelling. Now, don't think about spelling at the cost of vocabulary. You're better to use a difficult word and spell it slightly wrong than you are not to use that word, but you want to spell as well as you can, yeah? It is important. Paragraphing. If you do not paragraph your work, it is going to have a massive, massive impact on the grade you achieve. How do you make sure you paragraph your work? You plan it first, and I've also done another video on planning, structuring, paragraphing, so I suggest you have a look at that one if you're unsure in this area. What else do I mean? Variety of punctuation. Let's see the colons, the semicolons, the exclamation marks when they're appropriate, hyphens, brackets, all of those things will help to lift your mark. And again, there's other videos on there on my channel, so have a look at them. Focus on the task set. If you're asked to describe yourself, it's no good telling the examiner a story about when you were 5 and your cat got run over by a milk float, because whilst that's something about you, it's not fitting the task, which is to describe yourself. So you do have to keep that focus on the question, and again I suggest planning will help you to do that. And the other thing I will say is that there's a link in the video description for this revision guide, which will let you download a quick activity to help you focus on these areas of your writing, your spelling, paragraphing, variety, punctuation. It's got a few examples and it lets you have a look at what they do well, what they don't do well. So top tip number 4 is to write as well as you can. Okay, that's it, writing to describe. 4 top tips. Number 1, lie. Create an interesting persona. Be somebody more interesting than yourself. Top tip number 2, appeal to the reader's senses. Sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. Top tip number 3, ambitious language. Take risks, use similes, metaphors, go over the top. This is creative writing, this is English. Show off with your language. And finally, top tip number 4, write well. Hope this has been helpful. Don't forget to have a look at that resource in the video description, and good luck with the exam.